Obviously, the mess that was this summer between we're not going to sign you and now you're in Kevin Durant talks and, oh, Monty Williams and him aren't on good terms and, oh, the Indiana Pacers just signed him to a max contract and, oh, never mind, we're going to match it and we're going to keep him and the vibes are going to be off. And I think Ayton is a very good player. I think there is still tons of potential there. He's obviously young. He's a number 1 overall pick. I think it will forever loom over his head that, you know, there's the Lukas of the world and Trae Youngs of the world that are thriving and doing things. And maybe DeAndre Ayton will let's not say maybe. DeAndre Ayton will never reach the heights of a Luka Doncic. I think we just have to go ahead and talk about that. But when it comes to options, when it comes to guys that may get moved, he seems like a likely candidate. Because of the fact that the Phoenix Suns are dwindling a little bit here without Devin Booker. I think it makes sense for them to do a slight retool because Chris Paul has not been what people imagined him to. And look, to be fair, man, he is 39 years old now, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I got to double check that. But he's older, right? 1 year older every single season at that age is very, very hard to maintain that level of basketball. I think we've probably seen the last of the best of Chris Paul. And it's hard because I think some nights he has it, some nights he doesn't. It's hard to replicate, and that doesn't help a guy like DeAndre Ayton. I think missing Devin Booker hurts. Obviously, Cam Johnson is a huge part of their team, and him not being there is big as well. I think it makes sense for them to do a slight retool, move into a different direction, maybe move DeAndre Ayton, maybe find a guard that they can play with Booker, and then you have, you know, whatever guard, Bridges, Booker, Cam Johnson, and you move forward that way and see how you can build. Because it just doesn't seem like the magic that they had in that run can be replicated again. And to be fair, even the magic that they had last season in the regular season just doesn't seem like it's able to be replicated. They're relying way too much on Devin Booker. That is clear with how they've played since he's been gone. Since you've been gone. Sorry.
I had the same. It was right there.
But where do you think he ends up getting moved if he does end up getting moved?
Well, first, Chris Paul is 37. I double checked it while you were speaking.
39. I'm so sorry, Chris Paul. I apologize.
I mean, to me, it's kind of a little, tomato. But I just with Phoenix and with DeAndre Ayton, they're in such a unique situation because, I mean, to I guess rewind a little bit to the Chris Paul extension that took place when that happened, and I saw that they gave him an extra year. From what was initially kind of thrown out there, that really surprised me. And I was like, I would be very surprised if that didn't come back to really bite them. And I don't want to say, oh, we're right there, it's now biting them in the butt. I don't want to say that. I think it's a little too early, but I think they're now primed, like you said, for all of the reasons that you mentioned. They're now primed for a potential retool, or I guess a minor retool. And Chris Paul is not the one that ultimately gets moved because that doesn't make sense right now. And so that, again, we come back to DeAndre Ayton and how all of the, I guess, off the court, Monty Williams, all that stuff, how that kind of comes into it. And so then you have to just look around and say, okay, well, what situations could you move a guy that's on a max extension to, like, what teams could he possibly fit with, what packages that could then net you packages or guys that are ready to win now. And that's very difficult. That's a very difficult match. And so I really only came up with 3 teams that I think actually make sense. And to me, there are 2 of them that make a lot of sense, and one of them that's kind of like a meh. And I think the two that make the most sense to me are Chicago for kind of a lot of the same reasons. They've got like we talked about even in our first episode, which you should definitely go listen if you haven't had a chance yet.
Tune in.
We talked about Chicago and who their kind of residual young pieces are if they do decide to go for a full reset or if they don't. And so Chicago has the contracts. Chicago has some young guys to try and get in there and make a switch. And I do think that could be something interesting for Phoenix to try and really, I guess, reset and retool to potentially put themselves in a better position come playoff time, especially if, I'm not saying that they're going to get a Zach LaVine, but even if you get a DeMar DeRozan, or just something different, because you can always, I mean, we're seeing what Kevon Looney is doing in Golden State and what he has been for forever. You can go out and find a big that fits his role really, really well. We saw them do it with Bismack Biyombo. So, I mean, there are always options there, but if you can go out and get a scoring veteran guy who can really help your team in a playoff environment, I think that could be huge for Phoenix, and it could help get them kind of back in a position where they do want to ultimately find themselves. I just don't know if they're going to be ready to pull that trigger, because it definitely is a big one to pull. Where are you at on a Chicago fit?
I think like it makes sense. I wonder if, you know, obviously Deandre Ayton is a younger guy compared to a Nikola Vucevic, to a DeMar DeRozan. So how much does that accelerate? And then also, what are you left with afterwards, when, you know, Vooch is kind of old and done with, when DeRozan is, and to be honest, I think DeRozan will continue to age pretty well, but, you know, how does that team look 3 years from now when it's Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic? I have no idea. I think for all those reasons, I see that as a difficult trade to make. If you're Phoenix, I think you're probably looking for more value back. Where that value is interesting, because obviously the Indiana Pacers are a team, and you have them listed here as a team. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there.
No, that's perfect. Go for it.
When it comes to the Indiana Pacers, you know, it was reported today that they are going for a win now move. They are hunting for that win now player. Obviously, the Miles Turner contract extension talks have stalled a little bit. I wonder if they stall a little bit more, first of all, and maybe he gets moved. I think the Miles Turner fit in Phoenix. Hi, Kitty. What's the cat's name, by the way?
Winston.
Great name.
For my new girl
Great
people
name.
out there.
Yeah. Oh, I do know. You know, a lot of people before I looked like a schmuck said I look like Nick from New Girl. Different story. Yeah, I know.
I love that.
If I wear the plaid shirt, you'll see it. It's okay.
We'll
see
it
out. When it comes to the Indiana Pacers, I think the win now move makes a ton of sense. But at the same time, what does that cost you? Miles Turner probably makes sense. I think packaging maybe a Chris Duarte. You know what? I'm not going to lie. Just kind of talking about it, I'm kind of selling myself on the fact that this makes a lot of sense for both sides. Miles Turner would be somewhat of a seamless transition. They wouldn't necessarily need to use him as much offensively as they do with Deandre Ayton, although he can stretch the floor a little bit more than Deandre Ayton. I think defensively, he brings that rim protecting big stuff that Miles Turner is a little bit better of a rim protector than Deandre Ayton, so that is a plus. I kind of like the fit. I don't hate that. And when it comes to DeAndre Ayton in Indiana, he was obviously coveted by them. They were willing to pay him that max spot. Maybe that's another guy that they look at. I don't hate that for Phoenix because it helps them compete now. And, you know, maybe you can get the salaries to get Buddy Hield involved in this trade as well. So now you're looking at Hield and Turner to Phoenix and DeAndre Ayton and maybe some salary coming back to Indiana. That kind of helps both teams. I don't know. I don't know if that ever gets done, but I think the feasibility of it is totally there.
Yeah. And I think that's the key is, again, trying to find teams that are moving maybe some, I guess, maybe more than others towards that kind of retool youth movement kind of mindset, I guess, or phase. But that also have very, very productive current win now players. And so that brings us, I think, to what to me is the most interesting team in this whole thing, because I do think that there's a lot there. And it's your Toronto Raptors. If they do try and go, I could see it. But at the same time, it's like, are you really going to move an OG for an Ayton? Are you going to move, like, is there anything with Fred VanVleet? I am so high on Pascal Siakam. I'm not someone that's like, oh yeah, you just move him if it means you get a DeAndre. Like, I don't know how I,
absolutely not. No,
I think a lot of people are quick to include him in packages if they either don't watch the Raptors or are not fans of the Raptors. And so to me, on one hand, I'm like, if you do want to go this youth movement, I'd be really interested to see a Raptors package and what that could look like for Phoenix. But I just don't know if it ultimately gets done, because I think Masai has a way of saying, or kind of coming from a place of, we are going to be the winners of a trade. Here he is. I just got to get it done.
It's okay. It's all good.
We're moving
Winston.
on. Hi, Winston. Okay, we're done. Good. God, I think he just wanted to be on, and then he was like, okay, I'll mind my business.
He noticed the camera.